This is the Rogue Lawyer podcast.
Good leadership means having the courage to sometimes piss people off. All right. Well, here we are at another Rogue Lawyer podcast, and we're going to discuss with one of our top trial lawyers, Luke Reidy. His recent experiences. Luke is a top criminal defense lawyer in the firm and in the area, and he had the occasion, by way of circumstance, to running his first jury trial. I was supposed to be there to do it with him, and he was going to assist me, but he stepped into the breach and ran the full jury trial from start to finish. And what we want to do is capture what that was like as a litigator, as somebody who's kind of being put into that high pressure scenario a little earlier than you expected. And I think our listeners want to hear what that was like for you. So tell us a little bit about what you were thinking.
Well, first of all, it's unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. The nerves, the rush, the experience, completely different, unlike anything else. I've always wanted to do it. It's something I was kind of anticipating. And when you gave me the opportunity to step up, I was excited at first. And then when I realized what that was going to take, I was a bit nervous. But as soon as it started, it was go time. It was great.
Maybe tell our viewers, a lot of people watch legal shows.
Yes.
Right? They see what it looks like on TV. But for somebody who had a previous successful career, went to law school, that's a long journey from the day you decide to go to law school to the day you step up in front of a jury and do an opening statement.
Yeah.
Tell us, those emotions you felt going through it and, how it differed from the movie. When you get your first jury trial, like you are so excited because this is what you dreamt of the day you got your acceptance letter, right? But soon after that excitement ends and you step into the courtroom, all of a sudden
it's
you
like,
feel...
be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, right? So why don't you start off with something like that? 'Cause that'd be awesome.
Yeah. So actually one of the things that brought me to law school was my love of like the Innocence Project and crime TV, things like that. So the second I got my letter, like my acceptance letter, since then I've been like anticipating and looking forward to my first jury trial. So it's always this like thing I've been, working towards and excited to get. And then all of a sudden I got this opportunity, and right away it was one of those like, be careful what you wish for experiences. I was terrified because there's going to be, somebody's life on the line. There's going to be the judge and then these 12 jurors that I need to convince them of my client's innocence. So this thing that I was like, looking forward to, I became absolutely terrifying. Right?
It's beautiful. I think it happens in a lot of careers. You dream for your chance to go into the show. You get excited that you're going to go into the show, but as soon as you know you're going there, all of a sudden you can get this dread that can paralyze you. How are you dealing with the stress of going into your first jury trial earlier than probably anybody else in the profession for a little while?
Well, I kind of treated it like I do most super stressful situations. I just buried myself in preparation. I made sure that I was ready for everything, probably over-prepared, because I didn't want to be embarrassed, right? I didn't want to look foolish, and I didn't want to do anything that was incorrect. So I made sure that I was super prepared, and in doing that, I didn't really give myself enough time to seriously panic about it. And then once it started, I felt like I fell into a groove. So
that would be an awesome life coaching tip for anybody who gets consumed with fear.
Yeah,
just get into the work and the preparation, and don't sit around worrying about things you can't do. And that's probably why you had a result that we'll talk about later. What's the relationship with a client? I think people want to know, like, you go to law school, you get through it all, then you have to find a client who has a case that can go to a jury. What do you tell a client about why you chose a jury?
Well, so first of all, the relationship with the client's extremely unique, right? It's really difficult not to become emotionally invested, right? And especially with the clients that we have here, right? You end up developing these bonds. And whether or not you're going to decide to bring it in front of a jury really comes down to the specifics of the case, right? If the details really need to be told to a group of their peers to really understand what happened, if it's more of a personal story, it makes way more sense to put that in front of a jury of his peers rather than having a judge really look at this from a strictly legal perspective, right? Because the law it's not black and white, but you've got this judge that's going to look at it through a specific lens, whereas a jury of his peers is going to really look at the human side of it a little bit more.
I think it takes a lot more courage to go in front of a jury. And was his family there? Tell us about like that kind of weight you're carrying
Oh yeah.
as a solo young lawyer. Sitting in there is the only barrier between your client and a jail cell and anal rape.
Yeah, that's one way to put it, but you're right. It's absolutely the case, and you've got him beside you. He's absolutely terrified. You can feel his like breathing change, and you can almost hear his heartbeat. He's so scared, and then his family members are just really relying on you. You can actually feel the weight of them on your back as they're behind you, and then at any break or at any interval, they're so grateful, but they're also, you can just see the stress and nerves. And then at multiple points throughout the week, there's emotional breakdowns, and there's all kinds of emotions that you're trying to manage them in a way, but you can't get consumed by them because you got a job to do, right? So it's trying to find that balance.
It's interesting, and I know a lot of people are fascinated because people wanted to go to law school or they watch, law shows. The pressures that you really experience in the courtroom are far more nuanced than what you see on TV, right? I think maybe you can even talk about how, like, when you're in front of a judge, you're not under the same scrutiny as when there's 12 citizens like watching your every move.
Yeah, and it's not just in the courtroom, right? It's so depending on where you are, if it's a big city, this probably is a little bit less applicable, but there's juries all over the country, of course, right? So it's anytime you're in the hallway, you're running into people that are probably connected to the jury in some way, so family members, everything. It feels like you are being scrutinized all the time, right? So it's not just your client, it's you. They're looking at you, how you present yourself, how you present the story, how articulate you are, how sympathetic you are to different issues that come up. Everything is being scrutinized. It's not just the client, it's also the lawyer.
That's why I think it's a bit of an art form to be able to pull this off. It's a skill set to know the law. It's a skill set to be able to write exams, right? It's a completely different skill set to go in a courtroom, which is almost like a theater. You have to take abstract and difficult legal concepts and translate them into a story to people who are watching you. And, from what I heard from the court staff who reported back to me, it's like you were extremely composed for somebody who was so new. How did you pull that off under that stress?
Oh, I was faking it. It was terrifying. But again, I had a job to do. I didn't really have time to worry about the implications. I just made sure that I was ready and prepared and took it one step at a time. But as far as composure and stress, oh yeah, I was feeling it. I was things went well. We'll get to that. But at certain points, we had to listen back to some of my submissions I'd made earlier, and listening to that, I could tell how scared I was in that moment, but I was really happy at how it didn't come across that way in the recordings,
So like they actually had to play back your prior questions and all of that. So
Yeah,
you had to listen to yourself speak in your first jury trial while still in your
my first jury trial. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
It was an interesting experience, and it's funny to hear yourself, saying the things that that need to be said, but hearing it back. And it's funny because when you're in that moment, you're so in it. Sometimes you miss some of the intricacies of how different people are reacting, and that's why it's great to have a bit of help, while you're there. On this jury, I had Isaac there the first day, and the notes that he took really, really helped out. And then hearing that recording is, there's other things that were really important. But
that's what makes, I think, the team that we're trying to build here a little different, is that we invest in some communication skills training, watching yourself on video. I think a lot of lawyers or people who wanted to be lawyers think, well, my brilliance alone will carry the day. And they don't understand that when you stand up, that lone person speaking in a packed courtroom, that verbal tics scream at people, that nervousness screams at people.
Yeah.
And the work that we do preparing for these things by going under camera before the trial starts, that all pays off. And the work you did there, I thought was amazing. And the hours you put in, the client will never know. I know they've sent a great review, and we'll be playing it later during the podcast. I think one of the things what the court clerk spoke to me about is, and I love learning from the people who are working in the courtroom but don't get the attention, is she said you'd be surprised at how many lawyers, when they're not speaking, act like they don't care. And so she said, you can see the jurors watching a lawyer when a lawyer doesn't think they're being watched. And, you can tell if a lawyer hates their client or likes their client. And you'll see a lawyer pretend to really care, but then as soon as he thinks he's off camera, acts like he's a joker, and it gets picked up. And the one thing she passed on to me is that from the day the trial started to the day it ended, like you kept that kind of regulated composure. Did you get that in your old career, or where did that come from?
To be honest, it's I'm not sure. I'm not positive if it's the way I'm connecting with the clients, but yeah, the emotion that I feel, it's not. There's no switch to turn it on and off because it was genuine, right? I really believed in my client. I felt for my client. I was there for my client, right? So when everyone left the courtroom and it was just him and I, it's the same as when everyone else is in there. I'm there to do everything I can to keep that man out of jail, and maybe that's why, like, it's that connection, right?
Yeah, I think the headline or the subject line could be, "It's not a job, it's a mission."
Yeah.
Right. So you're not just kind of showing up for a certain amount. It's like you're just committed to the cause until it's over.
That's something actually that I really noticed the difference between us and the Crown, right? The Crown was an incredible adversary. He was great, and he was really competitive in the courtroom. But then, as soon as we'd finished, there was no stress for him about the decision, and there's no worry about the implications. There was nothing. It was just he went in there, he did his job, and when court ended for the day, he had no worries. That was completely different than us. Like, I'm laying in bed worrying about it. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I can walk out of that courtroom and know either way I've done absolutely everything I can for that client. Not the same for the Crown.
Now, what I want to, and I know people will be probably most interested in this, and I don't think any TV show or movie I've ever seen has captured the incredible stress that one individual can have, namely a defense lawyer, when faced with the decision to call their client. And I want you to explain it from what you heard, how other lawyers do it, why it's such an attractive thing to always put your client on the stand, and we'll get into what you went through before you made your decision.
Well, so I didn't think that would be a central issue in my first jury trial, that's for sure, because I know how difficult of a decision it can be. The standard is you call your client. And the reason is because you don't want to be in a position where someone's going to accuse you of not doing a good job, right? Or an actual accusation of ineffective counsel.
So let's just back up a second. So people who are new to law, you have a jury trial, the Crown calls the case, they call the complainant, the police officers, a whole bunch. The jury hears all of their story first.
Yep.
Then it gets told, defense, call your case.
Exactly, yeah.
Most people expect you to put your client on the stand.
Yes.
Right? Now, everybody has a right to silence. No client has to speak. You don't have to call a case. Now, from what I understood of this jury trial, the Crown called their case, and you were struggling, and we talked about this for hours. Do I call a defense? Do I put my client on the stand?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
So what I was getting at there with the standard practice is you call your client. And the reason being is because you want to put them in a position where they tell their story. And in most cases, that might be the right thing to do, right? Is you put them up there to tell the story.
And the jury probably wants to hear it.
Oh, they definitely want to hear it, right? They want an explanation. Even if there isn't really enough to convict, if it's close and the defense doesn't tell their story, it weighs heavily against a finding of not guilty, right? Because they want to know. They want to know how this is explained. But the other side of it is from a lawyer's perspective, you have this pressure as well, because if you lose and you didn't call your client, now you've got this potential accusation where the client can say, I never got a chance to tell my story. Like I've been found guilty and my lawyer didn't let me tell my story, right? So first of all, it's always ultimately the client's choice, right? We give them the best advice we can, but we make sure we let them make that decision. But in this case, it really, like you and I, we went back and forth, right? And I've talked to everybody, and most lawyers are saying, call the client regardless. Call them because if they're found guilty, then at least you can say, well, I'll let that person tell their story, and it's out of my
They
hands.
screwed it up. It's
Right.
you can almost there are some weak lawyers that would be like, look, he
Yeah.
screwed up his testimony.
It's your out. It's it's your fail safe. It's if I lose, then it's their fault, right? It's so in this case though, not speaking to my client's culpability or anything like that, but some people just aren't great witnesses, right? They're
No, a skilled crown will make them look like a liar.
exactly.
That's why you tell people not to talk to the police as well, because good intentioned people can be tripped up. So in this particular case, the Crown's case wasn't that strong. You did such a good job cross-examining the complainant
Yes.
that you called me and said, hey, look, I think we could win this case based on how bad her testimony was.
Yeah.
Tell me what you were feeling from there on.
So the cross did go well. It went quite well. And then after that, the Crown did have a series of other witnesses, but they decided not to call them. Right. So now the ball's in our court. Are we going to call him? In this case, my gut and my instinct that I talked to you about was, if I call our client, I think it's going to lower our chances of success. Right. I was quite confident in that. Right. But it was our out. It's also this thing that every other lawyer is telling you to do. So I called you. We talked about it. We went back and forth. We looked at all the possibilities, and I thought, at the end of the day, I think my best chance of getting a victory or getting a verdict of not guilty is by not calling my client. And I accept that there's a lot of risks. Had I been wrong, there would have been a ton of criticism, and I would have set myself up for potential, I guess, accusations of ineffective counsel. But that's what was right to do for my client in this case, and I stand by that decision. So
I wanted to, I think we might be, like, this was your first freaking jury trial. Right? Like, this is something that experienced counsel who have done many jury trials are still terrified to do. So you're sitting there in a courtroom at the last minute told you're going solo. You do a good job on cross-examination, and then the judge says, tell me tomorrow what you're doing. And so on your first jury trial, you have to make what is, I consider, one of the most difficult decisions in any profession, to kind of expose yourself to the scrutiny if it doesn't go badly.
Well, the one thing that really surprised me about it was talking to you, right? So you gave me all the advice. You went back and forth with all the different aspects of that decision. But at the end of the day, you told me that this is the decision that I need to make. I was the one there doing it. So that was having the opportunity to do that in my first jury trial was absolutely incredible.
You
but
know,
also,
I don't want to get too weepy-eyed here, man, but it was like the first time I pushed my kid on the bicycle. And it was like, no, because I could have told you what to do.
yeah,
Right? But you can't learn unless you're put in that breach.
Yeah.
And then you have to make the call. I knew you were going to make the call.
yeah,
Right? But there's always a huge part in your brain that says it'd just be so much easier just to put them on the stand.
I know.
Right? It'd just be so much easier. Put them on the stand, prep them. But that's what differentiates between special forces guys and regular guys, top performers, and people who call it in. So how did you breach it with him, and how'd it go?
So I went through the risks and benefits, right? I went through them just kind of generally, and then at the end I said, here's why I don't think you should take the stand, right? So my legal opinion is that we've got a better possibility of success if you don't take the stand, right? Now, he also wants to tell a story, right? But he knows the risks and the exposure he's putting himself out to if he does take the stand. So at the end of the day, they trusted me. And
That's why I love this job, though, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, you trust your doctor to write your prescription or to do surgery. I think like trial lawyer is kind of almost like surgery. Like you're trusting somebody to put you under, cut you open, right? In this case, he's like, hey, I have to trust you. Yeah. And it just makes the weight heavier on your shoulder.
Exactly.
Right? Because you're like, okay, this guy actually trusts me, and now I'm carrying his future on my shoulder.
Yeah, and then it makes the jury deliberation that much more terrifying, right? Because you know that you've recommended this strategy, and then you're when you're waiting for a decision, it just weighs on you.
Let people know a little bit about, because I think it's one of the coolest things in law, but it's not for everybody. But you do your closing argument. You connect with those jurors. Like I don't even think, I see a lot of lawyers, they don't even look the jurors in the eyes individually, but you connect with those jurors. You passionately tell them why, your client's life is in their hands. And then they get they retired to the jury room. Tell us about what you're feeling viscerally at that point.
It's so difficult to explain, right? Because the week of the trial, right, you're seeing these 12 people. First of all, you've met them at the jury selection, right? And then you're seeing them for the week, coming in and out of the courtroom at the different intervals. And the whole time it's almost like you're trying to read them like a poker game, right? You're trying to get a read as to what way they're leaning and this and that. And so it's a very unique experience, right? And then when you're giving the closing, that's when you're really connecting with these people, and you're looking at them, and you're trying to really advocate for your client, but also express your emotions in this thing, right? And what you think the right thing to do is, and what you think the theory of the case is, and what are the right elements of the law and how they should be applied. But you're really trying to connect with these people. And it's this experience where you've no idea what they're thinking, and it's kind of interesting because there was one gentleman on the jury, that there's 12 people, but one of them seemed extremely receptive to our side of the case, right? Whenever I was making submissions or I was questioning somebody, he was very, very attentive. He's always taking notes, and you could see him thinking along as to what's happening. So I thought in my mind, okay, I got this guy. I think we have one of the 12 for sure, right? And then while they're deliberating, so they go off their thinking, they come back with questions sometimes. And he had a question at one stage, and that question made me think that he's actually looking for a reason to convict rather than find it. So the one person I thought we had was actually, we didn't necessarily have it, right? But anyway, so once we close the case and now the jurors are going off to deliberate, that is, I think for some lawyers, they're like, oh, well, it's out of my hands now. But no, it was like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You're sitting here, and like, technically, I guess it's not my fate, but the fate of my client, who I'm now intertwined with, is in their hands, right? There's nothing more I can do. I've done everything. So as soon as it's in their hands, you're thinking, what should I have done? What else could I have done? Should I have called my client? Should I have done this? Have I missed something? Right?
Yeah, I call it the excruciating silence of jury deliberations.
Yeah.
Because you have adrenaline like right up to that point, and all of a sudden the judge says, I now sequester the jury to retire to their room to make final deliberations.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, and
holy shit,
Yeah. And the family is there looking at you, and then you just go sit in the library, and you want to catch up on work that you've been ignoring for like a week, but
which
you
is
can't
impossible.
freaking concentrate on anything.
Yeah.
And so you're just really spinning inside your head.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And the thing is too, is it's, you can hear back at any moment, right? So at any moment you can get a message, please return to the courtroom. Yeah. There's a verdict. And the court staff who they were excellent, by the way. They were so helpful. They all thought, there'll be a response here very quickly. They expected to have a decision right away. So 1 hour turned to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. All of a sudden they've been in there for 7 hours, and no verdict. And then they came out just before 9 o'clock, and I thought, okay, verdict's coming now. No, it was to basically say that they're not going to get a verdict this night. They're going to be sequestered to the hotel.
And part of you wants to think, okay, like I was so good that they're going to go back there, shoot the shit for a little bit, come back and give me what you want. But like every extra hour, you're like, okay, what are these people talking about?
Exactly.
Right now? Like what the heck could they be talking about for 7 hours? And so you think, okay, I'm going to lose this. Like
and every question too that comes back from them to the judge, and when that happens, the defense and the Crown, we still have to make submissions to the judge about how we think it should be answered. But every time a question comes, you're thinking, okay, what does that mean? Yeah. Does that mean they're leaning this way or that way, or what's happening? And at one stage, it really felt like one person was holding this up. Like that was my impression, because just before they were sequestered for the night, they asked for 15 more minutes.
Oh, wow.
Like it could be solved in 15 minutes. So I'm like, does that mean that they're very close to something? Is that a not guilty or a guilty? So now you're going through all the scenarios, and those last few questions that they ask become so important. You're like, how did I respond? Did we respond the best way? And it's going to come down to one person. One person. Oh, so it was Terrifying.
if we had a sponsorship on this podcast, I would say this portion of the podcast is brought to you by the famous movie 12 Angry Men, which I'd recommend anybody who wants to understand a little bit of what can happen in a jury room.
Yeah.
Probably the best rendition of what can happen inside a jury room and how
1950s version, right?
Yeah, how frail life can be.
Yeah.
Based on kind of the personalities in there. You can have a great case, but somebody who disagrees with you is stronger than the other jurors.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can lose it. So you show up in the morning.
Yeah.
Let's let our listeners know what you went through when you got that call or that text.
Okay. So first of all, like throughout the week, you're looking at the jurors, but you're not staring at them, right? Because you're trying to be, I guess, appropriate, give them their space, and the whole time you're also being scrutinized, so you don't want to be that lawyer that's just staring at the jury the whole time. But that'll make sense in a second. But every time they're leaving and when they come back in, I did kind of notice if they look over at us or if they're looking at the crown, and I didn't know what to make of that either way, but I was taking note of it, right? So then they were sequestered the night before, right? So the judge said jurors back in 9:45, lawyers be close at be around the courtroom, say for 10 o'clock because just in case there's a verdict, but you don't need to be here. We'll send you a message and just get to the courtroom, right? So I'm just kind of packing up from the hotel, and then 9:47. So 2 minutes after they're supposed to be back at the court, I get a message from court staff saying the verdict is in. What the? How is there a verdict? There was no verdict last night. They get back, and within 2 minutes, there's already a verdict. So that kind of solidified in my mind that there probably was one person that was kind of on the fence, and now they've made that decision. They've gone either way.
Could have been one person who just hadn't had somebody pay for a hotel for a while.
Yeah, maybe.
So wanted to get a free night at the Best Western.
To be honest, these jurors I thought they were incredible, right? Because you got these 12 random people, but the questions that they were asking were on point. They were engaged. I don't know. I was really blown away. I was maybe critical of juries before this, right? Like, how seriously are they going to take a trial? But I thought that these people, they put the time in. They really seemed to care. The questions they were asking made me think that they were really thinking about the law.
That's cool.
It was amazing. But anyway, so then we get to the courtroom. We all get set up. Judge sits down. Call in the jury. Jury comes in.
So let's just slow it down here because so you sit down in the courtroom, you've told your client, we have a verdict.
Yes.
Right? That's the kind of phrase. Everybody's like, we have a verdict. And now everybody wants it over because they're exhausted. The court staff want it over.
I thought I wanted it over. But then when I got the message saying there's a verdict, the heart rate just completely skyrocketed, right? So, and even telling the client there's a verdict, it's not my life on the line, but the heart's going.
There's a split second. I remember every time I've done it, and I tell the client and their family, I go, there's a verdict. You see in their eyes like this almost pleading with you, like they look at you like, please, and it's like I can't do anything, right? But it's like you have to be stoic and kind of say, let's go.
Yeah, and that's so I said to them, no matter what happens, no matter what way it goes, we can handle it, right? And we'll deal with this, right? So we're here. We're gonna do everything we can. But no matter what happens, we're here. So then we go in there, and every step. So now, we sit down. The judge comes in. We stand for the judge. He calls in the jury. As it's building, you're just the nerves are just there. It's not like anything I've ever experienced. It's just different. And then, so like I said before, at each interval, I've been kind of watching, kind of noticing, if the jury's looking or if they care. And it was really hard to read anything. But anyway, so when he called the jury out, they came out, and I felt like each person looked at me in my eyes for the first time, like really, right? So I made eye contact with people as I was giving my addresses, things like that, but each person looked at me right in my eyes. And I don't know if that was because they're thinking,
sorry.
Sorry, or you've done it, you've proven your client's innocence, right? So I'm not sure, or even the opposite, that, you lost and we're happy about it, So I have no idea, but I did notice it. I noticed that they all looked at me, and then the judge asked the jury if they have a verdict. They do. The jury foreman stood up.
Let's talk about the foreman for a second, just because people want to learn about there's 12 jurors, and one of the games, not games, but you try to pick who's going to be the foreperson.
Yeah.
Because the jurors go back in the room and they select one person who's going to read the verdict.
Yeah.
And usually it's the person who kind of wants to control or do that, because
Yep.
some people don't want to read it. They're terrified. Did you pick the right foreperson?
I tried. That's what I was doing, was trying to figure out, and I was completely wrong. It was not one of the people that seemed to have a dominant personality. Not one.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was this. I'm not saying that the personality, wasn't dominant.
Yeah.
I just you're trying to guess based on what you're seeing.
There's
right?
some jurors that look like keeners,
Exactly.
but it's interesting that there's often a quiet one who's really watching, doesn't draw your
Yes.
attention, and they are the one that will step up. It's true in life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And it just shows you, how little you know sometimes, and how you can't rely on these ideas of who's going to be, the person to step up when it's required. Right. So so this woman in the back row who I could tell she was listening intently, but I couldn't tell that she, was the person that would have, stepped forward and put herself in that position. So she stood up. Judge asked, on count one, do you have a verdict? She said, yes. On count one, not guilty. And the second she said that, like I had
Gives
a
me
slight
shivers
smile.
just
Yeah.
listening to you say I haven't been there. Like,
But she also looked over at our table when she said it, right? So when she said it, like not guilty, I was ecstatic, but I was also, there's two counts here. And I thought of the two, the first one was a little bit easier for us. Right? And then on count two, we find the defendant not guilty. And then I was ecstatic, but the second it came out, the wails of tears and crying, like of happiness from our side, was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the hairs in my arm stood up, the shivers throughout my body, the emotions took over. Like that was the point where, I almost let go, because, you've been building this up and you've been holding it in, because you need to be the one that's stoic and solid. And that's one point. And then my client, he's extremely upset. This has been 5 years of his life, of this hanging over his head. And then I gave him a big hug. The jury was thanked for their time. And then I you can't thank them. You get no chance to say anything to them. And I was just blown away by them.
I love you're sitting there with composure, being stoic, but when you hear that first not guilty and there's another one that could come, you feel like I feel like you feel a tiny, like you shrink into your shoes just a bit with like, holy fuck, almost. And you can feel like a little water. And then when you get the next one, something about the human body, and it's got nothing to do with weakness. You've just been containing yourself. And there's a giant release that goes through your body that makes you almost want to just be emotional, because you didn't let them down.
Yeah.
Right?
That was it. It's you, when you met these people, you told them you do everything you could. Everything you could, right? I will put everything on the line. I'll do everything I can. But you can't guarantee a result.
Yeah.
You can't. So no matter what, you get to that point, there's nothing more you can do. And as long as you've done everything you can, technically, that's it. But it doesn't change the emotion, right? It doesn't change the want. It doesn't change the desire to get this for your client. And when I got it, it was just, it was incredible.
I love that. I think one of the things I'm sure you got it, but it's as they leave, the jury leaves, they kind of see, and that's what's cool about being somebody young, not young, but I mean like somebody who's earnest, like they can tell it freaking matters. You're just not like a government. And there's like, the jury kind of looks at you, a few of them before they leave, like from across the courtroom, they look at you and they can see the emotion on it. And then there's always like one or two men or women to look at you and they just give you a little nod.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
good fucking job.
That's right. Yeah. I definitely got that. Like the one thing too, is I'm not even sure if I could give them basically the thank you with my eyes, like you did it. Thank you, but I kind of gave
that
them the
little
nod
head
back
nod,
as
I'd
well.
love to get that on video just because
the most subtle thing ever, but they're like,
and the one I know that we've probably been playing, the thank you email from the client's family, and to the listeners in the community, this particular client was the son of a guy I served in overseas with, who was in Sarajevo during some of the crazy times, and his thank you to you and to me was he acknowledged the bravery. He served and got a medal, but you know what he said to me is that man showed the bravery to make the right call. And he goes, if he would have said do the easy call and put my son on the stand, we would have done it, and we couldn't have blamed him. But he kind of commended you on showing the bravery that we had come to value in the military. So I think that's like an amazing feather in your cap, and just the beginning of a long, great career kicking ass for clients
Exactly.
who can't afford to lose.
Looking forward to the next one.
All right, brother. Good job.
Thanks a lot.
Summer.